Jason Arkley, who's up in Athens, is a sports writer up there. He covered Ohio University for the Athens Messenger. Has been covering Coach Burrow since he's been the defensive coordinator at Ohio U, and then of course with Joe Burrow being up there at Athens High School, he's covered the superstar since his freshman season. Jason, we have a love affair with the Burrows down here in South Louisiana. I imagine you guys feel the same way about the Burrows in mid Ohio.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an easy thing to find yourself falling into. Jimmy and Robin, both quality people, and I'm sure it didn't take you guys very long to figure that out, and really the whole extended family. So I know they talked often during the season about how special the year was, and how being a part of Tigers football and the extent that thing grew and how much that meant to them. It gave them a chance every week for the entire family to get together. And Jimmy had told me this just about a week and a half ago. Like he's seen members of his family more over the last football season than he had in like the 10 years before. So it's not just winning games, but it was a really special personal connection with the whole family and with Baton Rouge. And I'm glad that kind of came to the forefront, and people got to know Jimmy and Robin a little bit because they're quality people through and through.
Find Jason on social media at Jason A. Messenger. Jason Arkley joining us here, ESPN Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Alexandria. The LSU digital department did a great piece on Joe in his senior season titled That's Joe, where they really kind of just dug in and did a full biography of Burrow, where he came from, where he's been, what he's accomplished, to where he is now at LSU and going on to the number one pick in the NFL draft. You've had a first-row view of that since he landed in Athens. What's different about Joe? What has made him different since the time you've started covering? What have you seen in him, the athlete, that's just been different than everybody else?
From the start, he's always had that gene, that X factor, where he's the most competitive guy in the locker room, on the floor, on the field. He's a better athlete than he often gets credit for. Quote, sneaky fast guy. When you'll hear that from commentators. But his mentality, his IQ, his mentality, his willingness to prepare in the right way. Those are things that don't really show up on film. Those are things that show up day to day, and it's those aspects I think are why whatever team he's on, they seem to rally around him. Like even in Ohio State, he wasn't playing on Saturdays, but you look at the impact he had when he left. How many of those guys still were invested in him and still wanted to see him do well elsewhere? The guys that were ahead of him on the depth chart at Ohio State, again, no reason to have that attachment to him besides the fact that that's the kind of dude he is. And it was that way on every team he was on as a 8-year-old, in the high school, in the college, and at two of the biggest programs in the country. This is a guy, when you're around him and you see his willingness to prepare, the mentality he brings, that's something guys respect and are drawn to and will rally around and behind. And you guys probably saw it as good as anyone over the course of the 2019 season.
So it sounds like, because we didn't really know what to expect when Joe Burrow showed up here. There was a lot of good kind of anecdotal evidence from the staff and talking to Burrow and how impressed they were with him kind of during the interview process and all these things. But it sounds like you've been ahead of the curve on this. What were your expectations when Burrow chose to transfer to LSU? And then did this last season surpass even those expectations?
I'll answer the second part first. Yes.
I mean, 60 touchdowns will do that.
We miss him so much, Jason.
Wait till next fall. You'll be.
I don't want to.
You'll be averaging 29 points a game. You'll be going, what is wrong? Whatever. But he had one of the best, arguably the best season by a quarterback in major college football history. Like no one saw maybe that coming, but it was always a matter for me when Joe said he's going to LSU. It was always a matter of, well, what's Coach O going to do offensively? Because it felt like if the system was toggled just a little bit, if it was made to dovetail into Joe's strengths of being a tempo quarterback, of being a spread offense kind of guy, and if they tailored their offense just a little bit to what his strengths were, I thought this thing could really take off. Now that was my question. I knew he'd be tough enough. I knew he'd win over the guys once he got on the roster. He's athletic, and he would check all those boxes. The question I always had was, would LSU go all in with Joe? And when they did, everyone kind of saw the results in 2019. But even with a drastically different approach in 2018, you still saw enough of what makes him that allowed them to really take that next step the following season, I thought. But yeah, I knew if he got a chance, he would play well, and they would have a winning program. They would be a legit title contender in the SEC. And if they took that next step with him, then it was like, oh yeah, here we go. And you saw that really early in 2019. By week 2, I was thinking, they went for it, and it's going to play out brilliantly for him, for this team, and for that entire fan base.
And so now he has to do an even tougher task. Talking to Jason Arkley, who's been sports writer recovering at Ohio University for the Athens Messenger. He's going to have to do that in the NFL level, in the pro ranks, taking over a Cincinnati Bengals franchise that's been struggling for a bit. What's the current temperature? What are the expectations for Burrow in Cincinnati here in year number 1, do you think, Jason?
That's a tough question, because the guy you've got on one hand, you've got a guy who's the consummate winner, the guy who's never been a part of a losing program, losing team, and on the other side, you got the Bengals, who, again, they haven't been quite as bad as their reputation, and they had some playoff appearances and stuff. They're not quite Cleveland Browns level. Unfortunately, I'm a Browns fan. I'm allowed to say that, but their rep is lovable losers. So it's an interesting marriage that's about to take place. I think locally that fans will be thrilled if the Bengals do take him. If they don't trade that one pick away, which I can't imagine they will, it just makes way too much sense. But he's a guy that I really think Cincinnati, again, if they go in with him, if they meet him halfway and try to accentuate what he does well, I think he's a guy they can plug in on day one and be competitive with. He's a special kind of talent. He's a special kind of dude. And hopefully if the Bengals have done their homework, they've come to that same conclusion. So, okay, the AFC North, it's a tough way to go. It's going to be cold. It's going to be cold weather. It's going to be bad weather a lot of the season. You've got rough defenses just about everywhere in that division specifically. So there will be some growing pains. But again, just like everywhere else he's been, if the Bengals go in on Joe, the history, the decades of history has shown that good results will follow.
Speaking of special dudes, Jimmy Burrow was here every Tuesday during the season, and we just fell in love with the coach on his insight and him really kind of being so humble along the way on the ride, and the ability to watch Joe play for the first time in over 30 years and being away from football himself. You've covered him and know him. What's this been like for him, just kind of knowing him personally and being up there in the part of the world with him?
It was so nice to see another side of Jimmy this year, just to be super fan. Typically in our relationship, I was talking to him a lot on the job, and so, when you're the defensive coordinator, there's times when you're talking and you're not happy about things because the state of college football nowadays score. So I had some conversation with Jimmy when things weren't going great, but he was always first class and all those kinds of things. But it was so nice to see him talk and show that I'm just a dad kind of side of his personality, because that's something I had seen before, obviously in high school, then even when Joe was up in Columbus. But for that to become the persona this year was dramatic and terrific. And he's a personality all on his own. And I miss having him around, because we would I'd talk to him about work stuff, and then we'd talk a little bit about Joe, and then we'd talk a little bit about this and that and the other. And He's a guy that, again, I've been here now going on 16 years. I still remember the first time I saw Jimmy Burrow. He was shooting basketball in the Convo, which is the arena on Ohio's campus. He was shooting hoops in there with Joe, skinny little 9-year-old Joe Burrow shooting hoops. Wanted to be an NBA player one day, and you fast forward 16 years, and he's going to be the first pick in the NFL draft. So it's been a heck of a journey. I'll leave it at that.
Jason, I'd be remiss since we have you here as a local, if I didn't ask you about what it was like for you watching that Heisman speech, seeing what Joe said about Athens, and then seeing the ensuing outpouring of philanthropy and charitable donations that came from it.
Yeah, so on Heisman night, I went to an establishment in Athens, kind of Jimmy's hometown bar, and they were, it was a full-fledged celebration. There was a TV reporter from Baton Rouge up there the same night, same place, to get the pulse of the nation, so to speak. And it was, I wrote a big piece about it. It was like a church service almost. It was like
wow.
They all showed up. They all wanted to be a part of the moment, and there was their guy, and he was making each and every one of them feel like they were part of the congregation. And when he spoke after winning, you couldn't. It was dead silent. And he said at the one point, he mentioned Athens and the hunger thing, and one loud dude in the bar said, I don't want to use the language on the radio, but he said, by God, that's an Athens County boy right there. And then the whole place erupted in a big roar. That guy kind of broke the tension, and they all roared. But there were people crying. There were 85-year-old grandmothers there, and there were little kids there, and everyone in between. And it was a really, it's not New York, it's not the downtown athletic club, but it was a special night nonetheless there in Athens, and in that particular establishment where like I said, it felt more like a religious experience. It felt like one of those revival kind of deals, revival outings under a big tent somewhere down south in the middle of the summer.
Wow.
But that was the kind of vibe it felt like that night, in particular in the establishment I was at. Really, really special evening there for a lot of folks.
This part of the world will always appreciate the connection that we have with Central Ohio, and that being the central figure of Joe Burrow. It was great to watch him play. We appreciate the insight you provided us this morning on his background. Thank you, Jason. Stay healthy.
Yeah, you guys do the same. Be safe out there, and I appreciate the time, guys.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Yes, sir. Jason Arkley. You can find him on Twitter at Jason A. Messenger if you want to find out what's in, keep up with the Burrow write-ups.